Record this year for having come the furthest away. I will be flying to and then from Denmark in about a week, so I do know how long it takes, you know, flying against the jet stream to get here. We appreciate this long travel, and he's going to talk about his Black Hornet. Yep, I got the name right. But all the little things, people who came before, every year Petter would show up with a tinier, you know, dual rotor helicopter, and here's my memory of them. If you know those little nesting dolls, you know, it was almost like he had little boxes that were nesting. And every year he would pull out, like, you know, yet another small one of those. So without that, Petter, please.
Well, yes, it's good to be back. I think it's almost 10 years since we had the last seminars. Couple of years without seminars. So this year I'm not bringing even smaller one. I think
more expensive.
Yeah.
That's more.
Slightly more expensive. So what I brought is this is the full kit for the Black Hornet system that we are producing. I'll go plenty into that later. But to get it started, I also brought some small parts, a mock-up of the latest version of the helicopter that's in this system. Unfortunately, I was not able to bring the, let's say, the current system. Due to, well, formalities. So the system I brought is actually a 6-year-old system developed more for, well, not commercial use, but dual use, civilian and military. The latest systems, they are developed more for military use, but they are same size, and you'll get a good feeling of what we're doing. But so you have something to look at while we are looking at this tiny screen that you probably won't see anything on at all. Second time I came to give a presentation when we were flooded out, I brought some of these small posters with something of what we were doing then almost 15 years back. So I found those in my basement before or when I was making ready to leave. So just pass them around. It has very little to do with the Black Hornet, but it's part of the history. So just start with passing those around, and start with passing the parts around as well, so we have something to look at. But since the screen is very small, I did print out the presentation on paper, but unfortunately I only have 4 copies. So I guess we'll put them 4 places, and you have to look at them and share them with others. It's one back here as well. So the talk I'll be giving today is the history behind the Black Hornet. And the Black Hornet is not a toy, it's a professional system. And as I mentioned, the system I brought is an older one, but I was able to bring a mock-up of the latest version of the helicopter. And I also brought a half-finished prototype number 1 of the system. I was convinced that I would crash the prototypes on first attempt, so I started to build 2 prototypes, what we call Hornet 1. Hornet 1A never crashed, so therefore I never finished Hornet 1B. So this is Hornet 1B, half finished. I'll pass those around as the first prototype and a mock-up of the final prototype. And in this box I have some of the parts that we are using in the Black Hornet 2. Black Hornet 2 is what I have in this kit. So what you will see in this box is printed circuit board with servos, main motor, lot of the autopilot stuff. GPS is in there somewhere if you can figure out where. And there are some stators for the servos, main motor, injection molded body part for the helicopter, and a rotor. Please don't drop it on the grass, but I mean, if something breaks, it's not the end of the world. We have a lot of these things sitting around in the office. But if it's light enough and you have good eyesight, you'll be able to see pretty detailed small things in there. Okay, so I'll refer to the screen even if it's too small for you to read, but it's the history of the Black Hornet. It really started a long way back. And I was in the second grade of school. I started.
Why don't you bring the box and display it?
Will it be easier there?
I was thinking that too.
Because
Yeah,
there
I mean,
aren't too many people on the side.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
some
Needs
people
help.
will be able to see it.
Still on the box? Or?
Yeah. I don't know. Yes, then, yeah, on the box.
The problem is I'm not able to see what's on there.
Come around the front.
what if we put it on top of that one? Then it'll be a little lower, but still slightly high. Because
Well, he's
it'd be more down at their eye
He
level.
just needs to come around front.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's-
Maybe you can on the other side so you can do the camera. Yeah, you're fine. Yeah, there you go.
like that?
Yeah. Well,
That's why I thought if it was here, he'd still be able to be behind it. Be more at your eye level. See, right now it's above everybody's eye level. Yeah, let's
Bring it down.
yeah, let's put it on this where it'll be.
No, you want it on the back for the people in the back.
Like this?
yeah.
Yes. Okay. But I'll have to step in front too.
Just off to the side.
Yeah.
Too many engineers.
I'll move back and forth so you can have something on there. Well, I was dreaming of. Some of you have heard part of this before. I've been into part of this in earlier presentations. But I got an idea or was starting to dream about maybe one day it will be possible to have a small helicopter kind of thing hovering in front of me at my desk in my room. And of course 50 years ago that was pure science fiction. It should be almost silent, should be possible to control very softly around the room. When I do a test flying of the Black Hornet 3, the mock-up I sent around, typically I do that at my desk, power it up, goes up, flies on a combination of video and inertial navigation. I can fly for 25-30 minutes over my head at the desk without having to touch any controls or anything, or if I like, I can move around in the office. It's more or less the dream I had 50 years ago. But it's been a long way there. On this tiny video there, you'll see the second flight of what I call the ProxFly rotor system. That was rotor system I was able to develop early in this century. It's started to have almost stable flight 1999 or something like that, but the first real stable flight was in 2002, I think. When I was able to do that, I thought that this is something interesting, and that stable rotor system went into being developed as a toy. So from the toy, went to actually real professional systems. This system is actually then the result of many years of thinking about small helicopters, dreaming about them, and eventually doing it as a business. So what you see there is this system. You'll be able to see more of it shortly. Why did I start to do this, let's say, indoor electric helicopters? Well, if you are able to see on the left there, it's model airplane flying in Norway. Most of the year it's freezing cold, and in the winter we are flying out on the frozen fjords. It's after a couple of hours it's not fun anymore. So I started to work on a helicopter system that could work in your living room. Thinking about my dream then 35 years back, and I was able to then develop the Prox fly rotor system. Most of you saw early prototypes of those helicopters, and very early figured out that this rotor system could be used for many different things. Maybe not outdoor operations, but I was able to use that system. That was before we had the tiny gyros that we are using today. So to stabilize a helicopter was really difficult. This system was passively stable. That allowed me to build smaller and smaller helicopters because I didn't need a heavy, big electronics. And that was what we refer to as bringing smaller and smaller helicopter each year. We also used the same system to develop toys. So the middle, it's impossible to see, but in the middle there, it's David Letterman flying the Blade Runner in his Christmas gift program that he used to have on this late night show. Every year before Christmas he showed different, new Christmas toys for that season. And the Blade Runner came on that show. That was pretty nice, sitting back in Norway, watching the show from New York.
Did he fly it properly?
No, he didn't. He just... No, he did everything he could. Yeah.
That's a typical.
Yeah, I think that was part of. Yeah.
Oh, that's part of the shtick.
Yeah. Down to the right there, you can see a helicopter I developed for Matt Keane. So.
AeroVironment. Just for AeroVironment, not me personally.
Yeah.
Couldn't afford it.
Thanks to Matt Keane, I was able to develop that for air environment. I'll get back to that. Just a quick run through of the different models I used to bring. This was what I call the Micron. That was the first attempt of going really small. We were able to get down to 7 gram. That ended up being a competition between myself and Alexander von der Rostein that developed the Pixel.
You've heard it.
Yeah, and also developed a Pico.
An informal competition.
It felt pretty real.
There was no prize other than prize.
Well, bragging prize is important. Yeah. So we were, without telling anyone what we were doing, we were emailing each other. I was able to get below 10 gram first, and then he hit back with 9.1 gram, and then I was able to do 8.6 gram, and we went back and forth. And finally we decided, okay, I think I'll be able to go below 7 gram, and he sent me an email back and said, well, I think I figured out how to get below 7 gram as well. And then we decided, okay, as soon as we get below 7 gram, we call it a draw, and we present it. So on the day, 100 years after the first flight of the Wright brothers, we published what we have been doing with videos and everything on the internet, and then it got pretty much attention. I continued, did a nano flyer, and you can see it's a little hard to see these small pictures, but to the lower right corner there is a picture of the nano flyer besides one of Matt Keen's small models.
Oh, yes.
And I'm pretty sure that picture was taken during the informal presentations at the Roscoe Diner when we were floated out. Yeah. Helicopter besides a glass of wine, it's, even though I like wine pretty good, it's not a huge glass of wine, it's a small helicopter. And then went even smaller to the Pico Flyer. So one interesting thing was, and this is a 9-volt battery besides the helicopter there. These things caught the attention of not only Matt Keen and Air Environment, but even DARPA. So when DARPA started their nano-aerial vehicle program back in 2005, I guess, both the Pico Flyer and the Nano Flyer made it all the way to Washington during the kickoff meeting for that program. If I remember correctly, I was not allowed in the meeting because I was not using.
And rightly so. You get a bad attitude.
Yeah. It have been a disaster to have me in that meeting. Anyway, I also did some small flapping things. Well, that's an even smaller helicopter. That was the year after. Less than 1 gram. There are not many helicopters that have flown that's less than 1.
Wasn't the most awesome flying.
It could fly for like 15 seconds or something like that.
Yeah, 15 milliseconds.
It's it doesn't fly anymore, but it still exists.
Small existing.
Yeah, and then the flapper with the handmade carbon fiber gear took 2 days to file it out under the microscope. Crazy things like that. Anyway, in between all of this, we continued the toy development, and that ended up with the Blade Runner, produced, of course, in Asia, sold by a Canadian company called Interactive Toy Concept. And that was just the first of a long series of different helicopters and flapping wing toys. The one that was, yeah?
Is it true that the blades have that corrugation in it because your prototype was a solo cup, and when you sent it to China?
Yeah, almost correct. It was a coffee cup.
Or a coffee cup.
Yeah.
So they literally reproduced it that
Yes.
way regardless.
That's true. And when I tried to tell them, well, it's just because the cup I used to make the blades had this for better grip, they didn't believe me. No, it has to be important for aerodynamics. and because they copied it, it worked okay. It actually worked pretty well. But I didn't see the reason why they should copy it that closely. So at one point I forced them to make a set of blades that were, normal blades. It turned out that because the blades were so thin, they completely lost the form and shape. So they were all warped and came out of the molding tool very badly. So they actually ended up going back to the original shape but not because of the aerodynamics, because of, well, the mechanical strength, like corrugated blades. Yes.
Or tri-motors.
Yeah. So, well, they kind of got it right, but for the wrong reasons. Yeah.
But that's part of why they put them in the cups too, because they're stronger. You know,
Yeah.
It's not just
It's
a bigger
not,
grip,
no, of course,
the
it's
boot
not
strength.
only for the grip,
Boot
it's
strength,
yeah. Yeah. So, of course, I should have had thought about it myself, but
Yeah, I'm
well,
a little disappointed.
yeah.
Over's perfect.
But it turned out to be a good story.
That's a good, excellent.
Um,
So that was the first proper non-tethered indoor flying
Yep.
helicopter that had proper control.
Yes.
There were other weird things. but
Yeah.
This was
But yeah.
it.
Yeah. And I guess that inspired Alexander in Belgium to get back in there. He had tried many years to do this and gave up. When I went to his house demonstrating the first Prox flyer, the carbon fiber stuff I took here, he said, "Okay, you have proven that it's possible. I'm back in the game." And I think
he was doing the Piccolo RC model, right?
yeah,
So he was trying as well to do a product, but
yeah.
and that didn't work.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So, but he tried to make a stable toy helicopter, but he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And but when I did the Blade Runner, or actually the Prox Fly carbon fiber thing, that was the prototype. He said, "Okay, you have proven it's possible. I'm back in." And I think also inspired
Yeah.
Matt to do the same thing.
But
Well, no, I was already going off.
Yeah.
I was in
But-
parallel, just
yeah.
behind.
Yeah.
Piccolo in the 90s worked quite well. That
One
flew
I
up.
had sure did.
Anyway,
Anyway.
Blade Runner was the first that actually worked as a toy. And then there were several versions, and we had the Micro Mosquito. That was the most successful one, produced in several million copies, including or not including the copies. so of course all of the toys are copied by other toy companies, even though you have patents and everything. So you have to move quickly and stay ahead of everybody that wants to copy. A good thing about working with a toy company that is honest is that you actually could get nice payment back for all your work. So the royalty income I got from all the toys, I started to think about how to use that. And at the same time, I joined the Nano program together with Air Environment.
Proposal.
The proposal, yes. Interesting aspect was that when we were writing that proposal, I also were contacted by Draper Labs. That I think they actually ended up with a contract.
Yeah, they were one of the teams.
Yeah, and JPL, NASA JPL contacted me
They saw
to.
you the Letterman bit, right? Saw the Letterman, David Letterman show. Maybe not.
No, I don't think they knew that
Okay.
I was behind that. NASA, I asked them, why do you want to be part of a Draper or compete for Draper DARPA contract for a nano helicopter? And then they told me, well, it might not be for the military use, but we want to develop technology for a small autonomous helicopter to fly on Mars.
First time back.
Yeah, so that's that was 15 years ago. Yesterday we heard that it actually did happen, and they probably got better help from Matt Kinn and Ben and others than what we could have done earlier. Anyway, Air Environment ended up with a contract with DARPA to develop the flapping wing hummingbird.
Yeah, so just we proposed a helicopter or a flapping wing, and we wanted to do the helicopter together.
Yeah.
And we spent a lot of time in the proposal, the CAD model, renderings, and options, and little winches, and all kinds of features, a gimbal camera for the helicopter. For the flapping wing, I didn't want to do it, so it was a crazy-looking egg with two little wings sticking out the top. I mean, it was just I didn't want to win that part. It was stupid looking. And then they called me and said, we want to fund you, but only on the flapper. They said, just cut out the helicopter part, resubmit the financials, you don't have to rewrite any of the text. Oh. It's millions of dollars. So it was, good news, bad news situation.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it was kind of good for everybody.
In 2006, we got a phone call from ESA, the European Space Agency, that it was possible to make a flapper on Mars.
Oh boy.
I did some calculations and
To fly forward or to hover? Because it's a big difference.
Yeah, fly forward.
Oh jeez.
And I did some calculations and figured out that it probably would fail mechanically if it flew at all.
Actually, hovering would be impossible too, because you've got the weight and you have to pump to produce almost no thrust.
Yeah. Well, anyway, the helicopter project with DARPA and Air Environment died, but it inspired me to start a new company. At that time I was working at Tandberg doing video conferencing systems. So with some of the money we got, or I got from the toy sales, with help from good friends, and also together with a couple of colleagues from Tandberg, we decided that it was time to start over again. We have been part of developing the video conferencing industry more or less from scratch. Very interesting, very demanding, and very rewarding when we were able to succeed there. But we decided that we wanted to start on something new and exciting, and started a company called ProxDynamics. The idea behind ProxDynamics from the start was to develop what DARPA asked for. A small surveillance drone that could carry a video camera, that could fly for 20-25 minutes, could fly out at least a kilometer, send live video back, operate in real-world conditions with wind and gusts and all of that. Apart from DARPA, Matt Keen, myself, and a few others, very few believed it was possible to do this. And to actually then do something like that, you need something to believe in. So when we started the company, we had a vision. We wanted to be the world-leading supplier of airborne nano-reconnaissance and surveillance systems for professional use. Pretty high ambitions when most people thought it was impossible to do. But again, most people thought it was impossible to make a passively stable helicopter as well. But it was possible. So our mission was then to develop, produce, and sell these small systems and, well, equipment around it for professional use. And we had a strategic goal of fulfilling our vision of being the world leader in nano systems. We had a vision of, if we are successful, before the year 2020, we should be able to have a turnover of more than 100 million US dollars. Pretty insane numbers looking at the toy industry and where we came from. With a good, well, bottom line, we should be able to make money as well. 2020 is next year. If we are able to deliver on all the firm orders we have, we will have a turnover next year of 100 million US dollars. So we were able, or at least we are very close to fulfilling our, let's say, dreams when we started ProxDynamics back in 2008 or late 2007. But to be able to do this, we didn't start from scratch. We had a lot of experience. I had a lot of experience in how to build small helicopters. Together with my colleagues, we had a lot of experience in how to send a live image from one place to another place. So using not the video conferencing technology, but the knowledge we gained through the years at Hamburg. We took that knowledge and of course all the network we had. We knew how to produce this kind of advanced mechanical and electronic systems. Fused all that together, and we were able to build up, I would say, outstanding team. We had 3 managers from Hamburg. I was head of mechanical design, industrial design. The guy that headed up the electronic department and the guy that headed up the audio and real-time systems department, we all joined forces. And within a year, we had 2 or 3 more people that had worked at Hamburg. All of the guys we had hired once before. So we had been able to pick from the very top shelf, the very best people, and we were able to build a team of people that we knew could work together. So that is important to be able to develop things like this. Since we had been building I had been building a lot of small helicopters, we knew that it's impossible to start with a big one and try to shrink it down while you keep all the fancy performance. So we started small. This is Hornet 1 as a finished helicopter. The thing I sent around is basically that one. This has all the different bits and pieces on it. We started with the right size and right weight and went from there. Each time we had a new prototype, it did more and more. Started to build our own motors. In the box I sent around, you saw the motors. So we started to build them ourselves and also build machines to build the motors. To have a motor that's as good as possible, but still possible to build pretty easily.
Can you talk about that machine? Because I think a lot of us, well, I've heard it.
Yeah.
Just in general terms, what it's doing.
Well, it's winding the motors, precisely.
But the motor, the stator's, half-inch across. So how is it getting the wire between these fine?
Yeah, it's basically robotic control with a special tube that the wire goes through, rounded very milled down to be as thin-walled as possible, but still being strong enough. And then we have a 3-axis robot specially built for this that actually winds every turn precisely. Yes, very carefully tension controlled, and as when one teeth is finished.
Is there a camera that looks at it?
Yeah,
There
but the camera doesn't do anything other than if something goes wrong and you get an alarm, the operator can use the camera to see, because it's pretty hard to see what's going on. So it's a camera that's really
Just a monitor.
Yeah. But
So then, and a technician then terminates the wires and solders them together, presumably, or does the
yes,
robot?
yeah, but the robot temporarily winds a loop
That would
when
be
it's
cool to
finished
see
with
a video
one
of that.
phase, and
That's
then it
still a
goes to.
secret, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's. We have lot of people have asked us if they can buy those machines, but there's no.
What about gluing the magnets? Is that a machine or?
No, it's done manually, but to put all the magnets in the right place, that's a pretty clever fixture. It's almost like a machine. It's you put all the magnets in the right place in one operation. So it's more like putting the metal ring of the rotor in place and push something down, and then every magnet is in place, and then you glue them separately or glue them after that. So, but it's all the magnets, they are put in place in a couple of seconds.
Do you make the stators?
It's actually a UK company that makes the stators.
Oh, you know that already? I just wanted to get a UK plug.
They have to be very precise and right material, and it's difficult. Okay. Anyway, we were able to go to more and more advanced prototypes. This is the Hornet 4, the second to last before we went into production version. Here it says 16.2 grams. The final product ended up 17, 18 gram. But anyway, at this point we had GPS, full autopilot. Martin, explain how that works.
Peter, were you using off-the-shelf lithium, or did you actually get somebody building something special for you?
You want us to stop recording when you answer this?
I won't tell you what we're using now, but I can tell you what we were using on the first models.
Okay.
And they were specially made for us, but they were made by the same company that made batteries for the Pico C and others.
Okay.
Full River.
My point is, I think you sweat the detail on every single part to get that 16 or 17 gram.
Oh yeah.
Batteries, motors, everything.
Yeah.
How many connectors so you can plug things in quickly? The circuit boards.
Inside the helicopter?
In the production ones, yeah. In the production ones.
0.
0 connectors?
Yeah.
All right.
Like on the Mars helicopter, connectors are too heavy.
Yeah.
So well, I don't know where it's the box I'm sending around. You can see there inside the helicopter there are no connectors at all.
What about for testing? Are there little pads that come
Yeah,
down on
yes,
the needle?
yes,
pins?
small. So we had test fixtures with needles that could touch the special points on the printed circuit boards to test everything before you go further in the assembly.
So is the battery hardwired then?
Yes.
Charged in place?
Yes,
wireless
it is.
charging?
Kind of scary.
What was the year that you first had production units of that? What year? How many years ago was that?
2011, so 8 years
The
ago.
battery's
That's
not inductive charge, though. There's little pads, right?
Yeah, pads. That was the only connector we had on the helicopter. That was the pads on the side of the helicopter.
Inductive charging would add weight. And
Yeah, you have to have coils in the helicopter. No way you can do that. So yeah,
Single cell or two cell?
single cell. The
Flight time do you get?
Optimal conditions between 25 and 30 minutes.
There wasn't anything close to that at that time. Nothing.
Close to that now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
should switch to a battery company.
But the funny thing is that, well, I'm not able to talk much about the Black Hornet 3, but that's the latest version. But it's the same size, but the weight has grown from 18 grams to just about 30 grams.
18 to 30 grams?
Yeah, 32 grams. And main reason for that was we started to put in connectors to save time in production.
Also to improve the
I'm leaving.
No, it's if you can have the power we have at 20 grams, it can handle much more wind than
Yeah, no,
what we
it's
can
better.
today.
It's
Yeah.
higher disc loading is what you need to fight more weight for.
No, we don't want a higher disk loading but we want the power. If you have the control authority and I have the power,
Well, if you have a control for it.
yeah.
But higher disc loading is kind of an easy way to get.
Yeah,
tolerance to it.
yeah, but it's that's
brute
in
force.
my view it's a big understanding that high disk loading in itself helps. It helps in gusty weather because it takes more to throw the helicopter around. But as the wind increases, you have to tilt the helicopter into the wind, and if the helicopter is heavy, you need to have, let's say, the vertical vector of your total thrust has to be big enough to lift the helicopter. And if the helicopter is heavy, it's a limitation of how much you can tilt it into the wind because the vertical components.
But if it's heavier just as a mass, like if it had zero mass, it would be hard. I mean,
Gust-wise,
control-
yes.
Yeah, you know, it'd be
But sustained
like a
wind,
balloon.
yeah. So in gusts, it helps to be heavy. But to take the sustained wind, it's better to have it light.
I'm a
Suppose you
I'm
have
a
the same
winger,
power.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
Did it grow in size a little?
It still goes in the same box.
Oh,
So yeah,
the soldiers are complaining about the extra weight. When you give them extra stuff to carry,
yeah, but here is one other thing. To go from 18 to 32 grams is almost nothing. But the thing is that if you carry the batteries to recharge the helicopter for many missions, you have to have almost twice as much batteries on you to charge the helicopter. So if you started out on the Black Hornet 2 having maybe 1 kilo of batteries to charge the helicopter for a number of missions, you certainly have to have 2 kilos of batteries to do exactly the same.
oh yeah.
But even though we tell the customers this over and over and over again, they don't get it. It's not the weight of the helicopter, it's the weight of the batteries you have to carry to charge the helicopter. That's the problem. And the Black Hornet 3, well, it copes with much more wind, it has much higher image quality, and it can do things that the Black Hornet 1 and 2 can't do. But when it comes to how long it can stay airborne, it's between 25 and 30 minutes. It's
The flight time per carried kilogram is low,
yeah.
and that's important. But it's cheaper.
To produce, yes, but we have put much more sophistication into it. So at the end, I'll come a little back to some aspects of the Black Hornet 3, but we have to move on. So autopilot, what Martin told you earlier today is pretty spot on. But in addition, we have used the compass to get the orientation correct. That in itself is problematic, especially when the compass is just an inch away from a big motor.
GPS, you have to lift it up.
Yeah, and to know where we are, we of course have GPS. So
Did you have problems with the nickel tabs on the batteries being slightly different in influencing the compass?
everything influenced the compass. Even
Current flows.
yeah, and capacitors, they tend to influence compass as well, and they could easily be magnetized semi-permanently. So to calibrate the compass and keep the compass happy, it's a nightmare. But you need to have it.
Do you do calibration per vehicle or do you
Per vehicle and per flight.
per flight?
So before flight, you have to do a little
Yeah.
compass.
Well, it's pretty small, but yes.
So a little movement.
But during flight, it's updated all the time. So it's constantly updated. But yeah, you need the compass to get the GPS to operate properly. GPS won't help you unless you know where you are headed. So to actually use the GPS, the compass needs to work. But then again, we can use the positions from the GPS as the helicopter moved to take out the arrows in the compass. So it's go back and forth. And we also have a pressure sensor, barometer to control the height. GPS have height information, but it's typically not accurate enough. So we use the barometer to control the height. Most sophisticated thing in the helicopter is actually the radio link. So let's say the basics of the radio link is the same in the Black Hornet 2 and the current Black Hornet 3, but the current Black Hornet 3 operates on completely different frequencies. I could probably say as much as the Black Hornet 3 operates, the Black Hornet 1 and 2 operates on pretty low frequencies to start with. Way down from the 2.4 or 5.8 gigahertz systems. The Black Hornet 3 operates even far lower in frequency. And why is that important? Well, if you're flying out in the field here, it's just a drawback. It's not important at all. It just limits the bandwidth, the number of bits you are able to send between the helicopter and the operator. As the frequency goes down, typically you have less and less information that you could send between the helicopter and the rest of the system. So it's a drawback, but it's a good thing about going down in frequency, and that is the radio signals penetrate buildings, so we are trees, things like that. So we are able to now fly behind trees, inside building, even underground. That's important.
The radio link both
You
ways.
also encrypt the communications,
Yeah.
so that's more overhead.
It's maybe I might be able to say a little bit more about the radio link at the end, but I won't go into details there because that's something that's used in the current system as well.
But the uplink and downlink are nominally the same kind of wavelength family.
We have one link,
both ways.
both way. One link, but it's the radio link is the main reason why our systems are export controlled out of Norway, because the radio link is pretty sophisticated. But it's based on off-the-shelf parts, but the software is not off-the-shelf. Okay. So this is the basics. It's impossible to see here, but it basically is what we just discussed. Developing systems like this in Norway could be challenging. So even though there are some pictures of nice warm labs, up to the right, it's how do you do a GPS characterization in the middle of the winter? You need, you can't do that inside because you have to have a clear, well, perfect reception of the GPS.
Inflatable soccer dome.
That's one possible way of doing it, but if you are on a low budget, that we used to
They
be,
don't have those in Norway?
yeah, yes, but not near where we are. So we actually,
Talked about the $100 million.
That was later. He didn't start with that. So one thing we did to characterize the GPS was bought a party tent. We had an office with a flat roof, so we shuffled off the snow and put the party tent up, and then we bought a toy model train kit. So we laid out the tracks on the ground there, and then we put magnets on the side, and we used the compass in the helicopter. When the helicopter was moving along the tracks, we used the compass to detect every time we passed the magnet, and then we had a magnet with the opposite polarity as the 0 point, and then we had the train with a helicopter mounted on the train, and it went around and around and around, and we could record the GPS positions and monitor exactly where on the track we were, and it could go for a couple of hours, and we had a lot of information, and we could do that with different antennas and setup and things like that. No, you need to do that to have full control over the delays in the GPS signal, things like that, because it's not constant and it depends on a lot.
We would just use a kid on a scooter and just have
Airbus and even Boeing typically fly new airliners to Oslo during winter time to test them for freezing fog. Freezing fog also affects nano helicopters. So if you look at those pictures after, you will see on the leading edge of the tail rotor and the main rotor build-up of ice. We didn't think that would affect the helicopter at all, I mean the freezing fog. So the first time we experienced this, we thought something was wrong with the motor. We were flying, and then suddenly it started to descend slowly. We had full control, but the helicopter just couldn't climb anymore. And it ended up landing. And when we got over to the helicopter and looked at it, we had more than 1 millimeter of ice built up on the leading edge of the main rotors. And it was thick. The ice was four times thicker than the blade itself. And of course also the lenses were affected. Pretty blurry image there. Some of the small parts with...
Well, did you do something to fix
No.
that? It's just a limitation.
Yeah, we are currently doing something together with the University in Norway. They are looking at
Coatings or something?
yeah, special coatings.
Heaters?
One company is doing that as well, but we have told them that no, it's
power.
Yeah, we simply can't afford all the wires going up there and the power. But the coating looks promising. We developed all parts in-house. All printed circuit boards, all electronic, but not the electronic components itself. But everything that has to do with mechanics we developed. And you will see, you have seen the helicopter and you'll see it more. This is main printed circuit board, main motor, and the paper clips. The paper clips are the normal size, not the big size. So they're pretty small. And also we have the challenge of then actually industrializing this, take it from a prototype to something that could be produced. Looking at what I sent around, you can realize that even though it's a production model, it takes forever to produce. But still, we were able to finish the kit as you see it here.
So one question about the rotor.
Yeah.
The stator. The lamination thickness is quite significant, I think.
On that one?
Yes.
Yes, it's, yeah. But it might not be exactly like that on current versions. But yeah, used to be like that. The thinner, or it's not correct to say the thinner the better, because you have to have insulation between, so it's the optimum point. Anyway, here is the Black Hornet 2. For those of you that have seen the mock-up of the number 3, it's more or less the same size, but this is, well, slightly smaller. This one is more fully integrated with no connectors and nothing, and that's the main reason for being large. The connectors we put in the Black Hornet 3, altogether it weighs 2.5 grams, something like that. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 connectors, I think. 5 actually, if I have on the battery as well. Yeah, on the Black Hornet 3, yeah. But these 2.5 gram meant that we had to put in a more powerful motor. And when you have 2.5 gram and 1.5 gram more in the motor, that also draws more power. You need to have a bigger battery. And then suddenly you are up 7-8 grams, 25 grams. But then you need a bigger motor again, because yeah.
Bigger tail motor.
And then you need a bigger tail motor. And before you are able to stop that bad circle, the 2.5 grams ended up being 13, 14, 15 grams. It's terrible.
It's similar to going to Mars. Very problematic.
Yeah, it's crazy. But anyway, back to the Black Hornet 1 and 2. This is, I don't know, there's supposed to be some music there. It's pretty annoying, but sorry. Yeah.
Tech drama music.
Pretty sure just knock off of the Batman music.
Yeah. When we, just before we had finished the development, the British Army came to us and said, we have problems in Afghanistan. We need something like what you are developing. We tried to tell them, well, it's not ready yet. We need to really finish it before we can start sell it. They told us back, wrong answer. Before I go into that, this is the Black Hornet 2 version of thermal cameras, just continuing on the advert there. We have color camera up to the left, and we have white out, black out, and a fused thing there. The Black Hornet 2 used the very first version of the Lepton camera from FLIR. So that's how we come in contact with FLIR, that later acquired the company. It was through the Lepton thermal cameras. On the current version, we have a camera with 4 times the number of pixels, both the color camera and the thermal camera. But back in 2012, we were pretty early out with having a thermal camera in a small drone, and especially a drone below 20 grams. To the left there is actually the color camera. You can't see anything, but it was pretty easy to see with the thermal camera. Anyway, the British Army came to us and said, we need your systems. And we said, well, it's too early. But they convinced us to come and demonstrate the systems, and we went on a long series of trials. In early 2011, we went to Cyprus to demonstrate the system. The week before we were heading there, it didn't work. 2 days before we were heading there, it didn't work. The day before we were heading there, we had one helicopter kind of working. We were supposed to have 4 or 5 helicopters down there. And we had already written the email to our contacts in the MOD telling them, sorry, we didn't manage to get it ready, we have to cancel the testing. Then it started to get worse that, well, all the other guys were in place. They were waiting for us, and we were still said, okay, it doesn't work. We probably will have to cancel. So in the afternoon, the day before we were supposed to go there, it still didn't work properly. We had one helicopter, and we figured it's probably too late to call it off. So then we decided, we had worked all night through, we decided that we have to work all next night as well. We were out in the evening, testing, started to kind of work, and we were working all through the night. We were supposed to have a train to the airport at 7 in the morning. 6:45, we were still packing together stuff and decided we won't be able to get on the train. So instead we ordered a taxi to drive us directly from the office to the airport. So we packed the whole lab, everything down, and we were able to get on the flight and went down to Cyprus. And then we discovered that it was not only the MOD guys waiting for us, they had even politicians there. They had flown in a whole platoon from Afghanistan, arriving the day before to test the system. Altogether, it was 60, 70 people waiting for us.
No pressure at all.
No pressure. And we started out the first day. That image, it didn't work. We crashed 3 of the 5 helicopters we had. 2 of them really badly, and something obviously was wrong. And they told them, okay, we have to stop here. We'll take everything back to the hotel. We have brought a lot of equipment.
These were just fundamentally just kind of going, not just drifting off, but just
crashing.
Just fundamental flight control.
Yeah, a bug somewhere.
Martin? You have the string in your toe in front of the...
It's with a helicopter. It's actually harder to do that because there's nowhere to run the string. You have to have
through the mast.
Yeah,
Yeah, you have a hollow mast.
But
so no
but
problem at
but
all.
we don't have the hollow mast. But
Peter, I've got to say something. What you're telling now makes me feel so much better. For the following reason. This weekend that he went to Cyprus, I was in Oslo with my wife, and I called you before I came, and you said, sorry, I've got to go to Cyprus that weekend on an important meeting. You never told me what it was. So I got stood up. Business meeting, but now I understand. I feel a lot better about it.
anyway, we went back to the hotel. Some guys started to repair helicopters. We had brought everything, microscopes, like Matt brings everything, or quite a lot.
used to bring microscopes
Yeah.
and tools.
And the guys started to work on the software. We were all together 6 guys down there. 2 software, 1 electronics, 1 on mechanics, myself, and yeah, 1 more guy. We worked through the evening, still couldn't find what was wrong, but we had been able to put together most of the helicopters. Unfortunately, the mechanical builder, the model builder, he is also the test pilot. And at that time, we needed a test pilot to get a helicopter in the air before the autopilot and the GPS could take over. this guy, he was building helicopters or repairing helicopters all evening, all night, and at one point we realized that if he's going on, he will be so exhausted, he will not be able to fly the next morning. And then we had to take a decision, what's best, to have helicopters but no way of flying them, or don't have helicopters but a pilot. And I decided that, okay, if we don't have helicopters, we don't need a pilot. But if we have helicopters, maybe we'll find a way to grab the guy and keep him upright long enough to take off. So that we did. He went on, he was able to repair all the helicopters, and he completely collapsed. At the same time, the youngest guy in the team, he came straight out of college, started working for us. I think it was 2 o'clock in the night. He came up to the room where we were repairing helicopter, and he said, I think maybe I've found something wrong. It's something in my software. And can imagine, straight out of college, not that much pressure or what? And he had to come and admit that maybe he had done something wrong. But he said also, I think I might know how to fix it. And he continued for a few more hours. Sun came up. Here we went out in the field just after sunrise, and we tested it, and it worked. And we went to the place where all the other guys were assembled for the second day, and we told them, we think we have fixed the problem. We don't know for sure, but we are willing to start testing. If it works, we'll just continue on. Well, it worked, and we had a very successful week of testing there. And as some of you will know, here team leader is discussing with the captain from the Afghanistan platoon there. We were successful. The British Army gave us a contract for 200 million Norwegian kroner. That's like $30 million as a first order. That's pretty scary because
You had no product.
exactly.
You had a rough prototype.
So yes, it's we had a 3D printed version of this. We didn't have a screen because we thought that the army would have screens themselves. And the helicopters were purely prototypes with glass fiber, body parts and things like that. And they still got the contract for $30 million. This was in, I think, September, October 2011. And we were supposed to start deliver the first systems next spring.
For what it's worth, the American military is the same way. They want it now and they want it bad.
Yeah, but they took quite a while before they actually bought any systems from us. To be fair, they have put in pretty substantial orders now.
How many helicopters was the 30 million?
Can't discuss. But there are, the price per helicopter is pretty good, but it's a huge amount of work as well. Well, it worked out well. We got very good publicity. The British Army had a lot of nice things to say about the system, even though the system they have is nothing like the systems we are selling now. But still, at that time there were no alternatives. So this is a small video the Brits made to kind of tell a little bit about how they use the system. there are some, yeah, here you can see small glimpse of the guys operating the system. So when it's operated out in the field, it's not in the version you see there. It's in carrying well, harness and it's more camouflaged. We're able to, for those that saw the helicopter fly yesterday, it's not very noisy. You're able to fly very close to objects or people without them being able to detect it. So you can fly in, take pictures of number plates, things like that, without anyone noticing. And unless the car is speeding up, you could follow the car and well, do things that you normally would have problems doing with a bigger drone. The bigger drone can't fly inside the garage and take pictures of the number plate, things like that. So anyway, that turned out being a success. Just the timeline here. I think this more or less covered everything. Says that in 2013, the Brits and also other nations declared the system fully operational in Afghanistan. And we also got the first contracts with some of the US Army labs to test out the system. It was not a normal development contracts because we didn't want to involve too much US dollars in the development, but we were doing testing together, delivered prototype systems and reports and so on, and it started to get in contact with the US Army. We also started up a full rate production back in Norway, and we established a subsidiary here in the US. So in 2015, we had approximately 15 countries on the sales list, and that has increased over the time. So I can't go into exact which countries, but now it's more than 30 countries around the world we are selling to, typically NATO and what we call friendly nations. I could talk a lot more about the helicopter, but that's probably better to do after on one-to-one, or if people have special things they are wondering about. There are a lot of, let's say, technically interesting things about the helicopter, but commercially it was going pretty well. So well that FLIR Systems, the company that made the small thermal camera we have in the helicopter, they came to us and asked what it would take to actually buy the whole company. And we said no, not interested, and sent them away. And then half a year later, they came back and it said no again, and they said, okay, but what would the price be? And we put up a pretty high price to make sure that we didn't hear from them again. So we asked for $130 million US for the company and sent them away. And not long after, they came back and said, okay. So in November 2016, we actually ended up selling the whole company to FLIR Systems.
And now you're unemployed?
I am actually still working, not in the same position, but I'm still working in the company, concentrating more on the technical stuff. Made sure that I don't have to sit in video calls with the bosses in the US. I don't have to do all the paperwork. I only do the fun part now.
You left video calls already
Yeah.
ago.
Yes. I don't need to do more video calls.
No more trips to Cyprus.
Yeah.
Where's the manufacturing, or is it
Still in Norway. It's
It is,
in a small town called Hønefoss, difficult to pronounce, approximately 1 hour northwest of Oslo. So today we are approximately 150 people, half of them in production, rest in development, sales, support, and then you sell to government. It's a Matt knows more about this, or at least as much about this as I. It's a lot of things you have to cope with outside the development and production.
So would you sell to other U.S. federal agencies besides the Department of Defense?
Yeah.
Okay, like the FAA or something
Yeah.
like that? Okay.
Yeah.
What's your original U.S. division? Does that still exist, or?
Yeah, that's
what
in
do they do
Somerset, Kentucky.
What do they do?
Mostly support and repair.
Logistics.
Yeah, and since it's a hassle to send military ship military systems from the U.S. to Norway, it's better to be able to repair in the U.S. So yeah, they are still there, and they are expanding. We competed with Air Environment for a big contract to the U.S. Army last year, and we were able to win the first phase of that contract. It's a several phase contract, but even the first phase was pretty big. So that means we'll have to increase the service and support activities in the U.S. as well. And we are also FLIR Systems. They have bought a Canadian UAV company, so we are working together with them, and they also bought a ground robot company. So it's now a full unmanned division within FLIR.
You get some votes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
In development, did you experiment with colors? Like because it's like black.
On the helicopter
Yes,
itself?
on the helicopter.
Yes. But mainly to make it more difficult to detect. And then you have to decide, is that when you have a blue sky as a background, or trees or other things as a background. We found out that the first version, the Black Hornet 1, was light bluish gray to blend in with the blue sky, but doesn't work.
It's just opaque. It just blocks the light.
Yeah, so it looks black.
It looks black no matter what.
Yeah. So then on the Black Hornet 2, the one we have here, it's much darker, because if you have a typical background like the trees over here, the black or dark gray is better. And also the Black Hornet 3, the current version, is like this, but also different colors. Some parts black, some parts gray. So to break up the colors.
Did you want it to be hard to see on the ground too, so people don't pick it up? And
No,
it's lost in
no,
the air?
that hasn't been an issue. So,
You can try and fly?
yeah, I'll end with a little bit about the Black Hornet 3. But this is the Black Hornet 2, and this is a system that's developed for not specifically for military use. It ended up being sold mostly to military customers, but it's a product that was intentionally developed also for fire brigades and rescue service, things like that. It's not possible to buy this version anymore. We stopped selling it 2 years ago.
How much is it on eBay?
I don't know.
Okay. Our stuff comes up, and we have to, go after them. But that's
Yeah.
commercial. You should do.
Yeah, I don't think there has been any attempts. Some guy pretended to sell it, but that was a digital version that you could put in a video game or something like that. So anyway,
Have other companies tried, no countries named specifically, tried to clone it, reverse engineer it?
no. And we
Talked about
discussed
that.
that the other day. If you start to look into what you have to go through to copy it and to get it work, no, it's not worthwhile the money. You probably could.
Cheaper to buy.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
You have to have all the skills that they had to copy it. It ends up being the same.
Yeah, and there might be that some Chinese organization or someone in Russia have tried to copy it, but we wouldn't know. But I'm pretty sure that if they look carefully into it, they wouldn't.
They would have to make the machine to wind the motors, you know, the injection molding. They'd have to figure out how to do.
Yeah,
You
it's.
can make a couple deliberately screwed up and just sprinkle them around Asia.
Yeah.
Reverse engineering.
How many? Do you have any idea how many are lying somewhere on in
No.
the world on the field,
planet.
No, I don't know.
unretrievable?
Probably several hundreds, but I
Bottom of
don't
the
know.
ocean.
Yeah, I no idea. Okay. Normally the helicopter needs a GPS lock to fly. It's possible to get it inside the tent, but it takes a while. So therefore, I'll attempt to fly it using the video cameras to help stabilize the helicopter. It still is the gyros and accelerometer that controls it, like Martin told about earlier today. But to cancel out drift
This
and
optic flow kind of.
yeah, no, it's a little part of that, but it's more like feature tracking.
Your helicopter is always going up and down. Is that to help with the stabilization?
Since we don't have, yeah, it's not a big secret. I think we even have a patent on something here, but
Like a
But-
chicken?
yeah, it's like some birds are up and down
Yeah.
to simulate stereo vision. So yes, it's the autopilot that does it, and it's done to be able to calculate the distance to the objects. It's
I had a
tracking.
cat with one eye and he did the same.
Yeah. Okay, I have GPS, so if the video part doesn't work, we might be able to try to go directly to GPS, but we'll give it a try.
So you shake it to turn it on?
Yeah.
Is that what you did?
Yeah.
Oh, that's clever. No, don't want to wait.
Just like your iPhone.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
Is this the height primarily barometer?
Yes,
Okay.
little bit of accelerometers, but
So it's going up and down for this video?
Yes.
effect? Oh, okay.
yeah.
All right.
So is there real-time video stabilization of the downlink?
Yes.
Oh, show up the screen and hold up the screen.
Yeah, but yeah, now you see it moves up and down. But then
Good.
when
on that.
Yeah.
when you
Have like a
yesterday when we were flying outdoors in the pretty gusty conditions, you could see.
Do you want? Can you walk down and show everybody? I'll hold this.
Yeah, I'll just.
Your stabilization in the ground station?
Oh, it's getting close.
Yeah, maybe it's just.
I think the rotors are icing.
We might be able to switch over to
Careful, it's
GPS.
getting close to the pole. Okay.
Let's see. It's the GPS quality isn't really good, but let's see if we can go over to GPS because then it will actually stabilize. Okay, now we are flying GPS instead of video. then we have to deal with GPS drift instead.
Do you also have a GPS in your ground station? Or
Yes. Okay, so let's see if we are able to keep it there.
Is the 30 gram version noisier?
A little bit. Yeah, so you can see the live video there. But it's, again, this is 6-year-old system, so it would have been more interesting to bring latest and greatest, but maybe another time.
So are they linking the video to facial recognition systems yet?
Maybe.
I know you're happy to answer that.
Maybe. We don't do it.
The thing is, what you ask, the answer is, in fact, yes.
Yeah, I know. I've worked with the companies that do
What you
this,
can come
so
up.
I know they do. And they're scary good.
Okay, so this helicopter, if we had the tent open, we could fly it outdoors. We can fly probably a mile downrange. We can switch to GPS
Where's the antenna on the ground?
inside the controller.
Just above your hand there.
Yeah. So in here we have the GPS antenna and the radio link antenna for the helicopter. So
that's a nice breeze.
so you can set up at waypoints. Could fly automatically to different waypoints, and if you lose the radio link, it will automatically return to either the last known position of the controller or a different position you have programmed in. If you get low on battery, it will tell you that it's time to come back, and it will automatically fly back if you ignore it. But you can override it. If your mission is so important that you are willing to lose the helicopter, you could override all of these warnings and just stay on the target as long as you have power. Nothing is stored on the helicopter, so when the power is out, all the software, all the image, everything is out. Yeah, we actually don't store any video or live images on the helicopter, and that's in case it crashes and it falls into wrong hands.
Can I take
Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
Okay, so
Nice.
then.
Does it have obstacle detection?
Not this version.
And maybe another version does that memorize the obstacles on its way back?
do mapping?
Well, it's possible to do. Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about the relative merits of that more conventional helicopter configuration versus the quads that we see more and more?
Yeah. Well, it's whatever the tail rotor does is just a loss. So in every calculation you have to subtract what the tail rotor does, because that's just waste. But on the other hand, the single big propeller is far more efficient than the 4 small propeller in a similar sized pod. Compared to coaxial helicopter, like the Mars helicopter, that will be slightly more efficient because you don't have the tail. I think most people believe that what we were developing in ProxDynamics from the start was a coaxial counter-rotating helicopter similar to all the toys I've made. So why didn't we do it? Well, you don't have to deal with the tail motor, so it's slightly more efficient. The problem is if you are not building a toy to fly in your living room, but something that works out in windy conditions and something that has to fly as quickly as possible out to a target, cope with, let's say, real world environment. You have to have very agile helicopter. It looks not agile at all like we fly it here, but I can promise you, if we flew that with a Futaba controller and a skilled pilot, he would fly it like a hummingbird around there. It's extremely agile, and it needs to be able to cope with gusts and difficult conditions. If you have two rotors, to make a helicopter agile enough, you need cyclic control on both rotors. And imagine something this size. It's a challenge in itself to have 3 servos in here to control one rotor. But then you would have the double number of servos and a lot of linkages. The complexity just explodes. So it's not practical to do. So that's the reason. Because you need control over both rotors, you can't do it in this scale. Quad rotor is of course much easier to control, but I would guess everything else being equal, you get maybe 75%, maybe 80%. Maybe you have more accurate numbers, but efficiency of a quad compared to the helicopter, same size. Something there.
70% of endurance using all the same pieces, technology, effort, costs. It's just going to be lower, and it's going to be a lot noisier. And it doesn't pack as well.
It's hard to compete with this package.
With the 2 blades.
But some of the racing drones are about the same size, they're extremely fast and agile.
Yeah, but they fly for 3.5 minutes.
Right.
Okay.
You can hear them in like the field over.
No, it's for different use. It's if you are out in the field and the enemy is trying to find you to shoot you, you don't want to fly something like that.
Wake them up.
But
what do you think? I mean, would you have ended up here if there hadn't been any micro seminars and you hadn't come?
That's true.
What do you think?
most likely not.
Isn't that interesting?
That all started with Sergio.
That's
What was your cut of the company?
So that's something to think about. I would say if I hadn't been invited into the project with Air Environment, I probably wouldn't have had let's say the inspiration or motivation to start ProxDynamics in the first place, and all of this would not happen. So and looking at the Mars helicopter, we'll hear about the Google thing. It's a lot of, it's not directly linked to what we have been doing here, but it's part of the inspiration why we have kept going on. So it's pretty interesting to think about.
All you can say is it's all Sergio's fault.
It's not all Sergio's fault because it's the people he was able to bring in here. This happened.
That's their fault.
So that's their fault. But you started it. At least for my part, you started it.
I'll take the blame.
I said inside this helicopter is 3 tiny servos. They are extremely hard to manufacture. So when we start the next generation, one of the things we really wanted to try was to get rid of the servos. So just to finish off, I'll talk a little bit about one interesting aspect of the Black Hornet 3. And the reason why I can talk about this is most of this is published through patents already. So this helicopter has altogether 5 motors, 3 servo motors, a main motor and a tail motor. The Black Hornet 3 has 2 motors, that's all. 1 main motor, 1 tail motor.
No servos.
No servos, no actuators.
Wasn't the first one, if I remember right, weren't you doing Hall effect linear servos at one point? But I'm not sure if that's what went into the. I know you were doing some work in that area, but I'm not sure if that's what went
On
into
the prototypes, yes.
Yeah, they were linear Hall effect, right?
No.
No, they're a linear rotary
drive.
Like a lead screw.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean by the linear.
Yeah.
Yeah. But and didn't you have Hall effect
Sensors
on them?
Yes.
Sensors on them. Yeah. But I wasn't sure if that ever made it into the production. I never knew what you.
Was never intention to do that.
Okay.
We were able to sell a few of them to.
Hey, you know what? And one of those is in Stephen Bo's ornithopter flying in the woods.
Yeah.
One of those original $1 million Prox servos.
So a lot of what we did early in ProxDynamics was never intended to go in the final product. We were on the websites. We were posting images of coaxial rotor stuff. We were selling linear servos with brushed motors. Intention was never to use any of this in the final product, but it was a nice way of let's say, getting geared up for the tasks we had to take on. But to get it easier to produce, we needed to make it simpler. And when you then get rid of the servos, what the hell do you do then? The Black Hornet 3 can fly in more gusts, more wind than the Black Hornet 2 can. So it's even more agile. It's even more powerful. So we were able to come up with a system that originally was used in a Japanese toy helicopter from 30 years.
Maybe even more than 30 years.
Maybe even more than 30 years. And it's based on a clever mechanical solution where you use the fact that the main rotor of a helicopter is a pretty big flying wheel. It's the inertia of a rotating rotor is huge compared to the motor that drives it. And if you are then able to manipulate the torque you produce in the main driving motor in a way that tries to speed up the motor to run faster or quicker than the main rotor and slows it down to run slower than the motor. If you then have between the motor and the rotor a flexible link so that the motor actually can advance in front of the rotor and slow down behind the rotation of the motor, then you have a relative movement between the motor or the lower part of the rotor and the blades. And this relative movement you can link to a pitch link on the blade. So when the motor speeds up, you give a positive pitch input on that blade. And if you abandon the collective pitch, go for a fixed propeller, cyclic pitch only, as one blade pitch up, the other blade pitch down. And if you can do this in a very controlled way, so you know exactly when you are speeding up and when you are slowing down, you can use this as your cyclic control.
So you eliminated the servos.
Yes. So far so good. The Japanese helicopter that used this pattern could hover well. The problem is when you try to speed up the rotor to fly fast forward, or if you are flying in high altitude with lower density air, you need to speed up, or if you are climbing or coming down. The difference in torque, let's say not the oscillating part, but the nominal torque, will give a permanent pitch input on that blade. So if you apply more torque to have a higher speed, constantly higher speed, that blade will have a higher pitch angle and the opposite blade, and that will lead to terrible vibrations. So the original Japanese toy worked well in hover in your living room, but if you try to fly outside in windy conditions, it started to shake and it lost control. So what we were able to come up with was a clever way of linking the lower part, the rotor, the motor and the rotor, so that it could, let's say, cancel out this. And we did this by putting in a viscous damper between those two parts. So that part has the purpose of only, let's say, transmitting high frequency components, but low frequency components like a permanent increase in RPM or torque won't affect it. So if you look at the rotor system, it's completely loose. It looks like it's not connected to anything, but that's because there are dampers between there. We also have, hard to see, but we also have fly bars to help keep everything level. Of course, then you need a system to be able to fight the fly bars as well, but yeah, it's possible to do.
Do you need the fly bars to help like get it spinning up initially, or does it do that? Okay?
No, it can do it. It can fly without fly bars. It's just much more sensitive. So this way we were able to create a system that only had two motors and some clever mechanics in between, and of course even more clever software to control it. So far so good. Typically when you need a very high cyclic rate, the very agile helicopter we need to fly outdoors in difficult conditions, you need as much pitch movement as possible. And it's a limitation on how much you can speed up and slow down the motor without using a huge amount of power. So to do that, we did one maybe even more interesting thing. Since the mass of the rotor and the mass of the motor with a spring or flexible element in between is like a mass spring system, it's possible to tune a system like that so it operates in resonance. So what we then did was to tune the tip weights of the rotor, the weights of the motor, and the stiffness of the spring, so that the own frequency of the system is around 100 Hertz, same as the RPM, typical RPM of the helicopter. So that means we only need a little torque variations from the motor to get pretty big relative movements and a lot of pitch control. And as a pitch control, other part of running a system in resonance is that you don't really have control over it. It could just spiral off and get way too big movements. So therefore we had to put in second damper that works in the opposite direction with different characteristics to make sure that if it started to get out of control, it dampens that and keeps everything under control. So to be able to develop this, to get everything to work, I think it took 3.5 years, something like that. But it works. So that's what we are using on the current system, and it makes it a lot more robust, easier to manufacture, and also much easier to repair because you don't have to worry about the service.
This
Yep.
modulation, will that cause a yaw movement of the body that
Yes.
has influence on the
Yes.
visual, the image quality?
Yes, so it's important how the motor need dampers between itself and the rest of the helicopter, but not too soft dampers because that will just ruin the whole thing again. So yeah. Takes a while to figure all of this out.
Looking back, if you could send yourself an email 4 years ago, would you say, go ahead and do this, or leave the servos in?
No, we would have done the same. Yeah, because it's so many good things about getting rid of the servos, but that's because of the small size. If we were to do a bigger helicopter, even though this system could scale up at least to a certain point, I probably would just buy commercial servos and stick in. I think that's more or less what I can say about the Black Hornet 3. Maybe someday I'm able to take that here. Yeah?
Just a quick question. Would the elimination of the servos in modulating the motor, like everything else being equal, would that be better for your battery life?
No.
Okay, so it's the same.
Same, more or less the same. And modulating the motor comes with a lot of additional problems, because if you try to take more out of the motor than what it actually has, that's bad as well. Then you start to you have to have very, very good control over how much power you have and only use what you have and things like that. So yeah.
So can I assume that you are using custom software to control that motor?
Yes.
You'd probably have the best micro brushless controller on the planet.
I don't know about that, but
okay,
they are just.
Do you use the irregularities in the magnetic field of the rotor to determine the actual position of the rotor?
No, we don't really.
You have to know exactly where.
We have to know exactly where it is anyway. Yeah. But yeah, we have that in the software. So for test purpose, we use that to make sure that we have everything under control.
But you have an extra sensor for that, or you
have to have a once around and one position?
Yeah, we have a sensor for a 0 point anyway. So just use that for. But yes, yeah, that sensor can be. It's a linear Hall effect sensor.
The level of difficulty. I remember when we were trying to build our own, little micro brushless motors, and I was talking to various people, and they were saying it's actually not hard to build a brushless controller that will run a motor at a constant speed. Getting it where it can start and stop and do all the things in between. And now I'm seeing what you're doing is you're modulating it. That just is another level of complexity.
It's two different beasts. To be able to precisely control the motor for every revolution. Yeah.
We had in the beginning a lot of problems with custom controllers with the flapping wing because of the flapping frequency, the current and the speed changes so much that most of the controllers flipped out, and we had a French guy who was able to make a controller that worked. Later, of course, many other controllers did.
I think some of us need some lunch.
Some lunch, yes.
Wonderful.